Well, it's a long time since I did a video, and basically we had a family tragedy. My grandson's father died very, very suddenly, and we've really been dealing with that and trying to help my grandson come to terms with losing his father at a very, very young age. So that's been the reason that I've been very, very quiet. A lot of family stuff going on, and really, I suppose coming to a realization that family is the most important thing, and everything that we've done in this movement we're doing for our families. So if we can't take care of our families, how can we attempt to take care of the country and to put things right in the country? So for me, I've personally been having a reappraisal, looking at the movement, looking at everything that's been going on, and I've come to some conclusions that I'm going to talk about in the next few videos. But today I want to talk about what's happened to Billy Charlton. Obviously Billy Charlton, lad from Sunderland, I say a lad, he's older than me, a man in his mid-50s, again a grandfather, has just been jailed for 21 months. For what? For speaking. Now, we're living in a society where it is becoming acceptable, and the media and the press encourage it. It's become acceptable for people to be silenced and for freedom of speech to be trashed if that speech is being exercised against some of the protected groups in our society. Now, a good friend of mine has scrutinised Billy's speeches and come to the conclusion that Billy said absolutely nothing that people don't say in private. He said absolutely nothing that we don't all think. He said absolutely nothing that I've probably said in public. So we're now in a situation where if you criticise British government immigration policy, and if you criticise rapists who come from an immigrant community, you will be sent to prison. Let's just be honest, that's the situation that we're facing here in the United Kingdom. And when Tommy was jailed, gosh, it seems like years ago, but it was only last May, when Tommy was first jailed last May, when he was just dragged off the streets for asking a question of a man who was a convicted child molester. I quoted the poem by the German theologian, you know the one. First they came for the communists, then they came for the Jews, and so on and so forth. That very, very famous poem. And I quoted it, and I put Tommy's name in there, and I think I put Jada Franson's name in there, and a few other people who'd been imprisoned or were being dragged through the courts, not for what they'd done. These people are not terrorists. The people that have been dragged before the courts in the UK are not terrorists. They are people who are standing against terrorism. They're standing against criminals. They're standing against rapists. They're standing against Islamists. They're standing against communists who want to destroy our country. They're standing against the EU, which I see as an enemy entity. James Goddard, another one, who was dragged through the courts because he called Anna Sowerby a Nazi. It was parody. He was mocking her because Sowerby's constantly rattling on about how dangerous people that hold our views are. James Goddard was dragged through the courts and was very lucky not to get a prison sentence. Tommy dragged through the courts again and sent to prison again. And now we have the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. There's a media frenzy. Because he had the audacity to say that those Remain politicians were surrendering to the EU. They are surrendering to the EU. You see, I just think the language that Boris uses is very, very... He's being very, very moderate. And I'm not a fan of Boris. I don't trust Boris. If we get Brexit by Boris, I'll be absolutely amazed. But Boris said nothing in Parliament that we shouldn't be able to say out on the street, and that we have said out on the street. And we are living in extremely chilling times where the authorities, the full force of the state is being used to silence people who are expressing perfectly legitimate views that were legal a few years ago. This country is going completely insane. And it's not us. It's not the people who believe in national sovereignty. It's not the people who believe that there's something very, very good about being British and there's something very wholesome about being British. We are people who love our country. And I'll say it, those Remainers, those people waving those EU flags, those 600,000 people that demonstrated in London those months ago, they are traitors and they are surrendering to a foreign power. And they need to be called out for it. And yes, we have a problem with rape gangs. And yes, mass immigration is a problem. And it's destroying communities. And it's watering down British culture. Why can't we say that? Why are people being arrested for saying these things? Why are people being dragged before the courts for saying these things? Why are people having BBC film crews chasing them and going to their houses? I sat with a man in the northeast of England. I'm not going to say it because we actually did a video. We were going to publish the video, but he asked me not to publish the video. I sat with a man who had his house, again a grandfather, who had his house smashed up by thugs as a result of the BBC persecuting him. This is a man that had done loads and loads of work in his local community, a boxing coach, a hard-working man that had built that house with his own hands and had to sell up and leave the area. Why? Because the BBC persecuted him, broadcast his address, published his wife's details in film, and he ended up having his life ruined because he made one comment about Gina Miller. I'll not repeat the comment that he made, but I must admit it was quite a funny comment, and I don't really have much of a problem with what he said. So that's the sort of thing that we're facing. That's the sort of thing that patriots are facing. Absolute and abject persecution by the media and by the state. Friends, we need to stand up. We can't all go to demos all the time. We can't afford it. But we need to stand up and we need to start making our voices heard. Free speech is under threat. If we don't fight for it, we will lose it. It's time to stand up and fight for freedom of speech with all our might. See you all soon.